Imagine trying to build a $500 billion supercomputer, right?
Okay. Yeah.
You want to guarantee your country wins this massive global AI arms race.
Yeah.
You've got the blueprints, you have the political will, but then you suddenly realize that you've accidentally locked the delivery drivers carrying your most critical components completely outside your own fortress gates. Welcome to the deep dive.
It's it really is a striking visual, and unfortunately for some policymakers, it's becoming a very literal reality as the tectonic plates of the global economy just shift beneath us.
Yeah.
Because the new global currency isn't just money anymore. It's frontier technology, it's highly secure supply chains, and incredibly complex strategic alliances.
Right. And we have a really fascinating stack of sources to guide us through all of this today. We're pulling from some dense academic literature on global production networks, specifically this really comprehensive paper from Store.
Yeah, that one is foundational.
It really is. And we're also analyzing economic intelligence reports from Mitsui & Co. that break down the rapidly evolving semiconductor rivalry between the U.S. and China.
Which is moving so fast.
Oh, absolutely. Plus, to understand the policy side, we have briefs from Minerva Technology Futures focusing on this recent wave of trade tariffs and also the latest mid-2026 Tech Association announcements from organizations like Tech UK.
It's definitely a diverse set of documents, ranging from academic to corporate intelligence,
Mm.
but they all converge on one central theme, which is the complete redesign of international commerce.
Exactly. So our mission today is to unpack how the global map is being radically redrawn around national security. We're specifically focusing on, AI, quantum computing, advanced semiconductors.
Big three.
Right? And more importantly, we're going to trace how these massive geopolitical chess moves trickle down to impact, well, you, the listener. The cost of the cloud servers you rely on, the availability of the hardware you buy, and just the underlying structure of the tech you use every single day. Okay, let's unpack this.
So to really grasp the magnitude of what's happening, we have to look at the Econ Store paper's analysis of how the foundational rules of global trade are basically being ripped up and rewritten.
Yeah, the old rule book is gone.
Totally gone. For decades, the dominant philosophy was this just-in-time model of production.
Right.
The entire global supply chain was aggressively tuned for maximum cost efficiency. But overlapping global shocks like, the pandemic, escalating military conflicts, climate-driven logistical disruptions, they've all really exposed the fragility of that hyper-optimization.
Right. It's great when it works, but terrible when one ship gets stuck in a canal.
Exactly. So we're now seeing a systemic pivot toward a just-in-case model.
Which fundamentally means trading peak financial efficiency for operational resilience. You build redundancies into the system so that when a crisis hits, your entire manufacturing base doesn't just grind to a total halt.
Yeah, and that pivot has birthed the strategy dominating our sources today, which is friendshoring.
Friendshoring, you hear that everywhere right now.
It's thrown around constantly. But the academic literature actually breaks it down into three distinct geopolitical imperatives.
Okay, what's the first one?
First is reducing risk exposure, basically pulling critical manufacturing out of volatile regions.
Makes sense.
Second is de-weaponizing supply chains. And this is a dual action strategy. A state protects its own supply lines from being severed by an adversary while simultaneously attempting to capture and control critical choke points so they can exert pressure on rival states themselves.
Oh, wow. So treating economic interdependence as a literal lever of statecraft.
Precisely. And the third imperative is maintaining extraterritorial influence.
Meaning what, exactly?
Basically, by redirecting massive production contracts to allied or non-aligned third countries, superpowers are essentially cementing diplomatic loyalty through deep structural economic integration.
It's like playing a high-stakes game of Risk, where you're suddenly realizing that your supply lines run straight through your opponent's territory.
That's exactly it.
So you're scrambling to build new roads, but only through countries where you have non-aggression pacts.
Yeah, it's a great analogy.
But I follow the logic for a government. Shifting from a global free-for-all to a highly regulated, gated community makes strategic sense.
Right.
But here is the mechanism I really struggle with. How does a government actually force a private, multinational corporation to uproot a highly optimized, highly profitable factory and move it to a friendly country just for geopolitics? Like, a corporation's primary mandate is shareholder return, not executing foreign policy.
Yeah, that tension is the core of the issue.
Yeah.
And it's what researchers in the Econ Store paper classify as state-orchestrated coupling.
State-orchestrated coupling.
Right. Governments are no longer relying on gentle persuasion,
Mm.
they are actively altering the underlying economic reality to make the geostrategic choice the most profitable choice for the private sector.
So they're just rigging the math. Essentially, yes. They achieve this through massive financial de-risking. A state might offer preferential loans, outright subsidies, or even bespoke insurance policies that protect private investments against geopolitical fallout.
Wow.
They act as network brokers, constructing the entire regulatory and financial framework required for these companies to operate profitably in new, totally untested environments.
So the state just absorbs the initial friction cost of moving? I mean, I saw some striking examples of this in the sources.
The Tanzania one, right?
Yes. China, for instance, has been locking in these long-term state-backed contracts for soybean production in Tanzania. And the goal is to systematically reduce their reliance on Western agricultural supply chains.
Yeah, and we see the exact same mechanism deployed by Western powers, too. Like Germany, in their race to permanently decouple its industrial base from Russian energy dependence, has been orchestrating massive state-underwritten investments in green hydrogen production.
Down in Namibia, right? All the way down in Namibia. By guaranteeing the purchase of that hydrogen, the German government alters the cost-capability ratio. It makes an otherwise risky African infrastructure project highly attractive to private German engineering firms.
So that paints a picture of friendshoring as this highly coordinated surgical process.
In theory, yes.
Right, in theory. Because when we transition to how this is actually playing out in North America, the theory seems to be colliding head-on with a very messy reality.
Oh, absolutely. The North American situation is a premier case study in policy collision.
We're looking at a situation where economic security and national security are actively contradicting each other. Let's look at the recent actions from the Trump administration in late 2025 and early 2026.
From the Minerva briefs.
Right. The stated objective is unambiguous. The administration wants absolute domestic dominance in AI, advanced manufacturing, robotics explicitly stating they refuse to let the U.S. become a technological vassal state.
Which is a very strong phrase.
Exactly. But the primary lever they are pulling to force that manufacturing back to U.S. soil involves sweeping 25% tariffs on their closest allies, specifically Mexico and Canada.
Yeah, covering steel, aluminum, and a broad category of non-USMCA compliant goods.
Wait, just to clarify for the listener, the USMCA is the foundational free trade agreement between those three nations.
Right, the updated NAFTA. And by leveraging national security exceptions to apply tariffs on goods that otherwise fall outside the strict origin rules of that agreement, the administration is essentially overriding the integrated North American market.
Which creates a staggering contradiction. I mean, wait, didn't the U.S. explicitly ask these exact countries to help them decouple from China?
They did.
For the better part of a decade. They pressured Mexico and Canada to build up their industrial capacity, specifically to be the designated friendshoring hubs. It sounds like trying to build a fortress, but accidentally locking your own supply trucks outside.
Yeah, and the fallout detailed in both the Precedus economics data and the Minerva policy briefs really illustrates the depth of that integration.
It's massive.
It is. Mexico and Canada were not just peripheral partners, they were the absolute anchors of the U.S. supply chain transition. Because of earlier trade policies targeting Beijing, Mexico actually dethroned China as the single largest source of U.S. computer imports.
That's crazy. Mexican facilities were the ones actually stepping up to assemble the physical hardware fueling the U.S. tech boom.
Exactly. And I know you were looking at the Minerva brief regarding Canada's role.
Yeah, it highlighted something equally critical. Their aluminum industry is so deeply intertwined with the U.S. defense industrial base that the U.S. Department of Defense officially considers it a crucial national security asset.
Which is a huge designation.
It is, because Canada has the abundant, clean hydropower necessary to run massive, energy-intensive aluminum smelters. And the U.S. desperately needs that material for both next-generation military hardware and domestic tech infrastructure.
So when you look at the economic math impartially, these blanket tariffs threaten to inflict severe friendly fire.
Right, severe collateral damage on the very industries the U.S. is trying to promote.
Right, because building an advanced semiconductor fabrication plant takes upwards of 5 years and billions of dollars in capital expenditure. The costs do not just come from the cutting-edge extreme ultraviolet lithography machines.
Right, the flashy stuff.
Exactly. They come from the structural steel, the specialized aluminum components, and critically, the legacy chips.
Okay, let's focus on those legacy chips because that mechanism is vital. These are the older, larger node chips, right?
Correct. They are not the cutting-edge processors that, train large language models.
Yeah.
But they are the silicon that manages power regulation, runs the industrial cooling systems, and operates the basic server management controllers within a data center.
Oh, wow. So you need a ton of them.
A modern AI facility requires millions of these legacy chips. So if you apply a 25% tariff on the fundamental building blocks required to construct and operate the facility, the structural cost compounds exponentially.
I mean, the numbers projected in the briefs are just difficult to wrap your head around. A standard 25% tariff hike increases the cost of a single advanced U.S. fabrication project by an estimated $4 billion.
$4 billion, just an added friction.
And it adds $750 million to the construction of a single new data center.
Wow.
And for a massive, unprecedented initiative like the $500 billion Stargate project, these tariffs could add an estimated $75 billion to the final price tag.
And this is where the macro policy directly intersects with the listener's daily reality.
How so?
Well, when the capital expenditure for a data center increases by $750 million, that cost doesn't simply vanish. It is amortized and passed down the chain.
Right, the companies aren't just eating that cost.
Exactly. It means the hourly rate developers pay to rent cloud computing power increases. It means the subscription fees for enterprise AI tools rise. Ultimately, you, the end user, subsidize the friction introduced into the supply chain.
Okay, so if utilizing blanket tariffs on your closest allies artificially inflates the cost of your own technological advancement, what is the viable alternative?
That is the big question.
Right, like if the goal is securing the supply chain without bankrupting the builders, how should allied nations share frontier technology?
Well, this brings us to a highly surgical alternative proposed in the Minerva policy brief. It's called a TSSA, or Trusted Semiconductor Sectoral Arrangement.
TSSA. Okay, instead of the sledgehammer approach, how does a TSSA function mechanically?
A TSSA is a limited scope binding agreement among a select group of highly trusted G7 plus partners. Within this defined inner circle, tariffs on specific critical items like advanced logic chips, semiconductor manufacturing equipment, highly specialized precursor chemicals, all of those tariffs are dropped to absolute zero.
It's like forming a tech Voltron. No single country has all the robot lions, so you have to link up with trusted friends to build the ultimate machine.
I love that. And I usually think of it like an international clean room.
Oh, a clean room. Okay.
Yeah. The exterior walls, the borders facing non-allied nations, are sealed tight with strict tariffs and trade barriers to keep contaminants out. But inside a clean room, among the trusted technicians, the components can be passed back and forth seamlessly without any friction.
That makes perfect sense, especially because the zero tariff environment is conditional, right?
Yes, entirely conditional. In exchange for frictionless trade within the clean room, every participating nation must agree to strictly harmonize their export controls.
Ah, so they all have to agree on the rules.
Right. They established a unified, legally binding consensus on exactly what technology is prohibited from being sold to strategic rivals. It basically marries the economic benefits of free trade with the airtight security protocols required for national defense.
Which is an absolute necessity when you look at who actually controls the hardware. I mean, the U.S. doesn't hold all the cards anyway. They might design the most sophisticated AI architectures in the world, but the physical supply chain is dominated by highly specialized monopolies scattered across the globe.
The choke points are fundamentally distributed.
Exactly. Look at ASML in the Netherlands. They hold an absolute global monopoly on extreme ultraviolet lithography machines.
Which are insane pieces of tech.
They use lasers to blast microscopic droplets of molten tin 50,000 times a second to print circuits at the atomic level. You literally cannot make a modern AI chip without them.
No, you can't.
Then you have TOWA in Japan, dominating the semiconductor molding equipment market. You have Ajinomoto, another Japanese firm, holding a near monopoly on the highly specific buildup film that insulates the chips. No single nation possesses a complete sovereign supply chain.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we can actually see this clean room strategy being actively deployed in the real world right now.
Really? Where?
The brand new June 2026 UK-Japan Frontier Technology Partnership. It serves as the perfect real-world blueprint of a TSSA in action.
Okay, what are the specific mechanisms of that partnership?
It's a formal, state-brokered marriage of complementary industrial strengths. The UK possesses immense capabilities in software engineering, AI architecture, and fundamental chip design, anchored by intellectual property giants like ARM.
Sure.
Japan counterbalances that with world-leading dominance in advanced hardware manufacturing, precision tooling, and material science. So this partnership creates a direct, frictionless regulatory pathway connecting the UK Semiconductor Center with Japan's state-of-the-art Rapidus fabrication facility.
Meaning a team of engineers in Cambridge can design a next-generation processor architecture and immediately send it to a foundry in Hokkaido to be physically printed and packaged without encountering a single tariff or customs delay.
Exactly that level of integration.
Yeah.
And the regulatory harmonization is already facilitating breakthroughs that were previously impossible. Like, the partnership recently allowed the UK firm ORCA Computing to successfully export a fully functional quantum computer to Japan.
Oh, wow, an actual quantum computer.
Oh, yeah. And transferring that caliber of frontier technology across borders is incredibly rare due to national security restrictions. It was only legally permissible because the trust frameworks and export controls had been explicitly aligned by the two states beforehand.
That represents the absolute ideal scenario for trusted allies. But, I mean, the geopolitical landscape isn't just made up of allies.
No, it certainly isn't.
The most fascinating and frankly counterintuitive dynamic in our sources is unfolding between the two primary rivals in this space, the US and China. When we look at their recent maneuvers, the standard playbook of trade embargoes and containment we just discussed has been abandoned entirely.
Yes. The developments chronicled in the Mitsui intelligence report regarding AI chip exports in late 2025 and early 2026 defied almost all conventional economic and strategic forecasting.
Let's trace the timeline for the listener. For several years, the prevailing U.S. strategy was strict containment. The government steadily tightened export controls, outright banning the sale of the most advanced AI processors to China.
Primarily focusing on NVIDIA's top-tier GPUs.
Right, the absolute gold standard for training large language models. But then the Trump administration executes this massive policy reversal. They abruptly lifted the export ban on NVIDIA's H200 AI chip to China.
And it is important to contextualize the hardware here. The H200 was no longer the absolute bleeding-edge generation at that time, but it remained a remarkably powerful, enterprise-grade processor.
Yeah, not the newest, but still incredible.
Exactly. More importantly, its computational capabilities vastly outperformed anything the Chinese domestic semiconductor industry could mass-produce on their own.
So the U.S. suddenly opens the vault, but they attach a severe condition. Every H200 sold to China carries a 25% tariff, payable directly to the U.S. government.
Right, a clever revenue loop.
Yeah, the strategic logic was allow NVIDIA to capture billions in sales from the massive Chinese market, take a 25% cut of that revenue, and funnel those funds directly back into subsidizing domestic U.S. innovation. Plus, it gives the administration a highly leverageable card for broader trade negotiations.
It marked a shift from a strategy of strict technological denial to a strategy of managed, heavily taxed proliferation.
Naturally, you would expect the Chinese tech giants companies that have been totally starved for this exact hardware to train their next-gen models to immediately flood NVIDIA with orders.
Which they did.
Oh, they did. But then the Chinese government intervened and actively blocked the imports. They suspended customs clearance for the very chips their industry was desperate to acquire.
Right.
So the U.S. suddenly opens the door and says, okay, you can buy our highly coveted AI chips, and China actually blocks the imports. Why would they say no to the exact hardware they need? From a purely technological standpoint, refusing superior hardware seems completely irrational.
Well, what's fascinating here is that the refusal was not a miscalculation. It was driven by a highly calculated long-term strategic vision rooted in three distinct systemic fears.
Okay, lay them out for me.
The first was immediate national security. There were persistent, albeit officially unverified, rumors circulating within intelligence communities that U.S. manufactured GPUs might contain hidden hardware or firmware backdoors.
The concern that the U.S. could theoretically track the physical location of the server farms, or worse, like remotely brick the processors in the event of a geopolitical crisis.
Exactly. If you are constructing your nation's critical infrastructure, you simply cannot allow your primary rival to hold the master off switch.
Absolutely not. Okay, what's the second fear?
The second reason is even more structurally profound, and it involves the concept of SUDI lock-in.
SUDI, that's a crucial piece of this puzzle. It's not a physical chip, it's the software layer, correct?
Yes. SUDI is NVIDIA's proprietary parallel computing platform and programming model. It is essentially the translation layer that allows software developers to instruct the GPU on how to process complex AI calculations. Over the past 15 years, NVIDIA has cultivated such a robust library of tools and resources around CDA that it has become the undisputed industry standard. However, CED is a closed ecosystem. It only functions on NVIDIA silicon.
I see. It's analogous to an entire generation of engineers learning a highly complex, incredibly efficient programming language, only to realize that language strictly, legally and technically, binds them to utilizing one specific brand of hardware for the rest of their careers.
That is the exact trap Beijing recognized. If Chinese AI developers build their next iteration of foundational models utilizing those imported H200 chips, they're writing millions of lines of underlying code heavily optimized for the CED environment.
They're building their house on rented land.
Yes. And if the U.S. decides to arbitrarily reinstate the export ban 2 years later, the Chinese tech sector is totally paralyzed. Migrating an established AI model away from CDA to a new, untested open-source framework is not just a simple patch.
It's a huge undertaking.
It requires entirely redesigning software stacks, retraining engineers, optimizing performance from scratch. It is a financially and temporally devastating process. The Chinese government concluded that allowing the H200 into the country would functionally addict their developer ecosystem to a platform controlled entirely by Washington.
Wow. So by enduring the short-term technological pain of rejecting the chips, they are aggressively forcing their domestic developers to build a non-CUDA sovereign software ecosystem today, ensuring they cannot be held hostage by software lock-in tomorrow.
Exactly, which leads directly to the third strategic driver, creating a protected incubator for their own domestic champions.
So forcing their own companies to step up.
Right. By blocking the influx of highly capable, relatively accessible NVIDIA hardware, the state artificially constrained the market. They forced Chinese tech giants to heavily invest in domestic alternatives regardless of their initial inferiority. They have prioritized absolute technological sovereignty over the short-term velocity of AI development.
And according to the Mitsui intelligence, that forced bottleneck is actually yielding results, isn't it? When you seal off the easy path, innovation has to accelerate out of sheer necessity.
The acceleration metrics are highly significant. The report highlights that Huawei's newest domestically architected AI chip, the 910C, has already achieved approximately 80% of the raw computational performance of NVIDIA's H100.
Wait, 80%? Bridging that performance gap relying entirely on a domestic supply chain is a massive engineering leap.
It really is. Furthermore, this intense state-mandated focus on self-reliance is triggering an explosion in China's advanced semiconductor manufacturing capacity. Industry estimates project their advanced wafer production will skyrocket from roughly 10,000 wafers a month in 2025 to over 126,000 wafers per month by 2028.
That's a 12x increase in 3 years. It presents a fascinating paradox. The U.S. attempts to utilize a tariff structure to simultaneously control the technology spread and fund its own advancement, but the sheer threat of that control inadvertently accelerates China's timeline for achieving complete technological independence.
It completely flipped the dynamic.
It really did. Well, let's synthesize the journey we've taken through these sources. We began with the academic theory of friendshoring, the urgent pivot from fragile efficiency to resilient state-orchestrated supply chains.
Right.
We then examined the incredibly complex reality of those policies in North America where broad tariff wars threaten to inflict friendly fire on critical allies, driving up the structural costs of the very AI infrastructure the U.S. is racing to build.
We then explored the surgical alternative. Trusted semiconductor sectoral arrangements, where nations like the UK and Japan create frictionless clean rooms to share frontier technology by perfectly aligning their export controls.
Tech Voltrons. And finally, we dissected the completely inverted dynamic of the U.S.-China rivalry, where superpowers are deliberately choosing self-imposed isolation, actively rejecting superior hardware to avoid the existential threat of software ecosystem lock-in. So for you, listening to this, the takeaway is that these massive, abstract geopolitical chess moves aren't just high-level statecraft. They are directly writing the receipt for the technology you interact with daily. The friction introduced by tariffs dictates the subscription price of the AI tools you use at work. The race to build sovereign supply chains dictates the hardware costs of the smart devices in your home. These policies are quite literally determining the speed and the cost at which the next era of technology will be delivered to the public.
Which brings us to a critical and honestly largely unexplored implication regarding the future of human advancement.
What's that?
Well, if we accept that these superpowers are going to continue building highly secure, entirely separate technological ecosystems, like China, actively avoiding the US CUA software platform, are we heading toward a fractured, regionalized internet?
Oh, wow.
Imagine a scenario in the near future where a smartphone bought in the West literally lacks the hardware to interface with an AI developed in the East. What happens to global scientific collaboration? If an AI developed in a sovereign ecosystem in the East discovers a revolutionary breakthrough in material science or synthesizes a cure for a complex disease.
But researchers in the West literally lack the compatible hardware or translation layers to access it.
Exactly. If they can't verify or reproduce the underlying code of that AI, how do we advance? What does a technologically bifurcated world mean for the future of global human collaboration?
Moving from a globally connected scientific community to one where breakthroughs are trapped behind invisible, insurmountable digital borders, that is a profound question to grapple with. Thank you for exploring these complex systems with us today. Keep questioning the architecture around you, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.